Yeah, good evening. I am here with Alberta Premier Danielle Smith on the sidelines of the Council of Federation meeting here in Huntsville, Ontario. Premier, thanks for making the time.
Yeah, my pleasure.
So today you met with Indigenous leaders, kind of the first kickoff to the conversations here. We know that you are really pushing for natural resource projects, pipelines specifically, to get built faster. Were they receptive in that room today to that suggestion?
Well, I think what we ended up talking about was economic reconciliation. And one of the things that I hope comes out of the discussion around the federal government's Bill C5 is how to make sure that there's Indigenous equity stakes in every major project. I'm saddened that it got off on a wrong foot with the federal government, but I think that's the intention of everyone around that table. We've got a very similar program, our Alberta Indigenous Opportunities Corporation, where we underwrite loan guarantees. It's been very successful. We've got 8 projects underwriting $750 million worth of investment. And if that's the intention of the federal government, I think it's going to be very good for First Nations. It might just take a little bit more work to get there so that there's an understanding, but I think everybody is of the same spirit, that we want to make sure that Indigenous involvement happens in every major project.
And so in that conversation, were there major projects that were discussed? Specifically in Alberta, I'm curious, are there things that you are eyeing that you would like to see moved ahead quickly under this new process?
No, we didn't talk about prospectively. We did talk about the things that we've done historically, because we have underwritten Indigenous ownership in pipeline projects. We have underwritten Indigenous ownership as well in a power project. We can also underwrite Indigenous ownership in healthcare investments and tourism investments and AI data center investments. And that, I think, we wanted to keep it very positive, and everybody had a lot to share about what they're doing in their provinces in aid of reconciliation. So it was a very positive meeting.
Okay, so in your view, as this process goes forward, there's a project that's put on the table. If Indigenous communities in your province of Alberta say no, what do you do?
I'm not anticipating that because in our community in Alberta, 43 nations have said yes to Indigenous equity ownership in a number of projects. And so I think that is the pathway to genuine reconciliation and genuine and meaningful consultation. When you have an owner at the table putting their lens on it, it helps you make better decisions to respect a treaty, to respect environment, and also to respect and ensure that you're getting the right route if it's linear infrastructure. So I'm feeling very optimistic that as more nations become familiar with that model, and British Columbia has a similar model, as does Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and Ontario, as well as the federal government, I think it's going to open up an incredible amount of opportunity.
Do you think, though, the concept of Indigenous communities having the ability to consent, say yes or no to development, that would potentially impact their lands, do they have that right?
Well, I would say that the nations that I've spoken with and the leadership I've spoken with, that's their understanding of the UN Declaration on Indigenous rights, is that they have the right to say yes. I know that there's a lot of environmental groups who had hoped that they would be able to convince all nations that the answer should always be no, but that's not what I'm hearing. What I'm hearing is that there's a real appetite for some genuine partnerships that will generate revenue so that the nations can become self-reliant, and I think we're all sharing that spirit. So that's how I'm going to go forward. I think there's a lot of positive that can come out of the conversations, and I hope that that's the spirit that the leadership will take as well when they're looking at Bill C5.
Okay, so looking ahead to tomorrow with the Prime Minister joining you, what specifically are you looking to hear from Mark Carney when he sits down with all the premiers tomorrow?
I think we're very concerned about whether we're going to get an early renegotiation of the Canada-US Free Trade Agreement, and he has indicated in the media as well that he thinks that we might have to be satisfied with some tariffs, and so I want to understand what that means, if that's across the board or if that's sectoral. I think we've seen with the U.S., they're talking about potentially not having a renegotiation on that until next year, which we just think would leave too much uncertainty. So I think everyone is really hopeful that there's a pathway to get to some kind of renegotiation by August 1st, which was the original deadline, but we'll find out more about that tomorrow. But that, I think, is going to be very much at the top of the agenda for all the premiers.
And do you trust in the conversations that the Prime Minister is having that the federal government is properly representing Alberta's views and taking your voice to the table?
Well, at the moment, the main industries that we have tariffs on are the auto sector, steel, aluminum, and forestry. And so I would say that we're impacted the most by the forestry tariffs, and we're supportive of New Brunswick and British Columbia's call to have a separate table where we can try to come to a national agreement specifically on softwood lumber tariffs. And then I'm supportive as well. You saw that Doug and I signed an MOU last week where we're agreeing to prioritize buying fleet vehicles from Ontario and steel from Ontario, and he has been such a champion for developing out the oil and gas sector. So I think you'll probably see that those are also the things that come out of this table, is that the premiers are supportive of each other. And I've been encouraged to see the Prime Minister talk about becoming an energy superpower and really finding new markets. I think that that's, again, what Canadians are looking for. I think that's what they voted for in the last federal election. And we're going to proceed in a spirit of goodwill, hoping that it comes to that as well.
So I take your point on, premiers supporting each other, but there is some division around the table when it comes to whether Canada should retaliate and whether there should be more of an elbows-up approach coming from Canada because this is persisting. In your view, do you think if we are hit with that 35% tariff, I know it is on a limited number of goods, that Canada should change its approach? We haven't seen the Prime Minister take retaliatory measures yet.
Well, look, I mean, tariffs are their own punishment. If you're mad at the other guy, you don't punch yourself in the face. That's what I look at tariffs. When I look at all of the calls that I have been fielding, it's the tariffs that Canada has put on goods coming in from the U.S. that are hurting the people in Alberta the most. So I would say we are better off trying to find a way to minimize the number of tariffs, minimize the number of sectors that are a source of contention, and then try to get to as close to a tariff-free relationship as we possibly can. But I've never supported tariffs on either side. I just don't think that having more tariffs on Canadian businesses and Canadian consumers at a time when we're still facing inflation and uncertainty, that's just painful. It's painful for households, and I just don't think it's the right pathway.
And just lastly, on the Globe and Mail story today about the Alberta health situation, you were asked earlier and walked away without responding. Your government has said you've had nothing to do with it, but you haven't condemned it. Why?
I condemn it. No one should be harassing anybody, and I don't comment on sock puppet accounts. I have no idea who's behind it, and so if there's criminal harassment, I hope that the RCMP finds them and punishes them to the full extent of the law.
Is there any more your government is going to do beyond the condemnation that they can do to look into this further? Is there anything further that you're prepared to do at this stage?
It's none of my business. It's up to those who are feeling that they've been impacted to pursue it to the full extent of the law, and I'll watch and see what happens.
And just to confirm, your government had nothing to do with it?
Nothing whatsoever, and I don't have anything to do with anonymous sock puppet accounts.
Thank you for your time.